Hey boys and girls out there in YouTube land, welcome to the Math Ain't Mathing channel. This is one of a series of videos that I want to put out to kind of help you better understand some financial concepts and underlying financial principles that are inherent in many financial transactions that we undertake in our lives. In YouTube, there are a bunch of videos that are out that basically talks about how it's not good to do this transaction and it's bad to do that, and it's, you need to do this or you shouldn't do that. But what I haven't seen in some of these videos is a good concept or discussion about underlying financial concepts that are inherent in some of these transactions. And at least in my case, it wasn't until I started learning about these underlying financial concepts did I start approaching some of these financial transactions differently, which helped me make better financial decisions. And I believe that if you learn some of these financial concepts, your decisions in terms of your future financial transactions will come out better. This particular episode, I want to talk about interest. We hear a lot about interest, but I'm not sure if people truly understand the concept of interest and how interest works. And in particular, in this example, I want to talk about interest from the perspective of car buying and car loans. So most people, when they seek out to purchase a car, the majority of those times, the car will be financed. I don't have the exact breakdown in terms of the percentage of people who buy cars cash, but it is a minority. Not saying that it should be a minority, but it is a minority. And therefore, the overwhelming majority of folks who look to buy a car, usually they finance it. When you finance a car, you obviously will get charged an annual percentage rate. That's how they usually label it. It's called an APR. And many times the APR and the terms of the loan will dictate what you ultimately pay. Here in the United States, 9 out of 10 times when somebody finances a car, what they really look at is the actual payment they make every month. What they don't really pay attention to is the interest rate and the length of the loan. And those two things, in my opinion, are far more important than the actual payment that you make every month. Monthly payments are important. Obviously, it matters for any particular person's budget. But in the long term, if you ignore the other two factors, the annual percentage rate and the length of the loan, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So let's talk first about the annual percentage rate. Now, when I first started going into purchasing cars, I didn't fully understand what an annual percentage rate was. Meaning, when I was told that my loan would be X% annual percentage rate, I mistakenly thought that meant that my loan interest would be 6%, 7%, whatever the stated rate was. What I didn't realize was that ultimately that is not how much interest you pay in the long term. And I think the best way to kind of illustrate this is to give certain examples with hypothetical numbers for you to actually see. So in the first example, I went on the internet and I found an auto loan calculator. You can go on and find many sites that have this, but which is not important which site you go to. It's the process that I think is more important. But anyway, I went on and I put in some hypothetical numbers in the auto loan calculator just to illustrate my point. In the first example, I threw in some numbers based on what the standard price of a car is right now. As of the date of this video, the average selling price of a car is about $48,000. So in this case, I took that price, technically it's $47,452. And then I punched in a term of 60 months with a 5% annual percentage rate and with $10,000 down, which is actually a very good rate in this day and age. It's very hard to get something that low, but it doesn't matter. This is just an example that I wanted to give. But as you can see, when I punch in that number and the down payment, and I haven't even factored in other factors, taxes, whatever. I mean, the calculator does put an estimate, but your state will vary. But if you look at the numbers, if I were to punch in those figures, what the calculator tells me is that your monthly pay is $706.77. That's where most people stop. They look at that number, and if that number fits their budget, then they think that's great. What they fail to do, however, is look at the other figures, which I think matters more. So if you see in this example, at the end of the loan, the total amount of interest that someone would pay using these figures is $4,953.93. And that's important because that actually is, if you look at the original price of the car, which was $47,452, what that tells you is that you're actually paying a little more than 10% in interest from the value of that car. And that doesn't even take into consideration depreciation. So, and that was an eye-opener for me because 10% and 5% are completely different. And what I realized was the annual percentage rate and the actual interest paid in total for the life of the loan are two different things. And in this case, the annual percentage rate of 5% was literally almost just about half of what you paid in interest. So that is incredible. And I think that that's something that is not emphasized when we talk about car and car loans. I'm going to now show you a different example with different numbers where you can see that the delta between the annual percentage rate and the amount of interest you pay in total gets increasingly large. So here's another example where instead of financing a car, I decided to hypothetically finance a truck. And I put a hypothetical number. It's not the most expensive truck, and it's certainly not the most inexpensive truck. But I put in $70,000 roughly for the value of a truck, which again, as of the date of this recording, it is not uncommon for trucks to sell for that amount. Mid-tier trucks, quite frankly. And in this case, I put in $70,000. I increased the term of the loan to 72 months to account for the fact that we are financing a vehicle that's more expensive than a car. And I put $5,000 down instead of 10, but pretty much everything else I tried to make it as close to the original hypothetical example. And again, it's more illustrative than anything. The other thing that I did is I changed the interest rate from 5% to 10%. So in this case, the length of the loan is longer, the amount of interest rate is higher, and the value of the car, or the price of the car, is higher. And this is where you start seeing a jarring example of what I was talking about. So as you can see, at the end of the loan, the amount of interest, the total amount of interest that one would pay if they were to finish off the loan is $21,700.92. That is 30% approximately, or just about 30% of the value of the car at the beginning of the loan. And again, that's 3 times the advertised annual percentage rate. And again, another eye-opening thing for me because, you know, as I stated earlier, I incorrectly used to think that if I was getting an annual percentage rate of whatever rate, that that's what I would pay for interest in the loan. And that's just not the case. And in this example as well, the payments increased from $706 in the last example to $1,204.18 in this example. So that's the number that most people pay attention to, the actual monthly payment. I haven't seen examples where people really talk about interest, but $21,000 for interest in this case is really, really expensive. It's a lot. I mean, it brings the value of the car, the price that you pay for the car, it shoots it up now to almost $100,000, even though I deliberately put in a mid-tier price of $70,000 for this particular truck. And again, I don't see that this is advertised or mentioned a lot when I see these videos. That to me is far more important than the monthly payment, because at the end of the day, you are purchasing a depreciating asset. So this to me is a double whammy. You're getting a depreciating asset and you're ultimately paying long term more than the sticker price of the car or the selling price of the car, however you want to look at it. And that, I think, is important to understand when you're going in looking to purchase a car. So finally, I want to give a third example, which in this example, I think is probably more on the extreme side, financing a truck with terms that I think are just totally unacceptable and that most people should find totally unacceptable if they do their due diligence when they're looking at the terms of the loan. Again, decided to do a truck, $70,000. I did it again for 72 months, but this time I did the interest rate at 15%, which again is a number that is remarkably common depending on what your credit score is. And I did the $5,000 down. In this example, the monthly payment goes up to $1,374 and 43 cents, which is not that big of a jump from the last example of $1,200. However, what you see in this case is that the interest that you pay for the length of the loan skyrockets from $21,000 to $33,958.66, which is almost just under 50% of the price of the loan. That to me is eye-opening. And again, it makes the total price you pay for the car, interest and everything included, to well over $110,000. And again, most of the time when people finance cars or when you see videos or things where they talk about car loans, the only thing that is emphasized is the monthly payment. And anybody who's ever purchased a car should have had this experience where the car salesman just focuses on the monthly payment. And most consumers, quite frankly, they only focus on the monthly payment. But if you focus only on the monthly payment and you don't pay attention to the interest rate or the length of the loan, you're really doing yourself a disservice. So what's the bottom line? Well, if you're going to purchase a car and you're going to finance a car, you should look at three variables equally. 1, the monthly payment. 2, the annual percentage rate. And 3, the length of the loan. All three of those variables are important, and all three of those variables are going to determine whether or not you're getting a good deal. The other thing you should take into consideration is that the annual percentage rate and the total amount of interest you pay for the life of the loan are not the same thing. Don't be fooled if they give you an annual percentage rate of whatever, X percent. That doesn't mean that that's how much interest you're going to pay for the life of the loan. And thirdly, you should always take into consideration how long the loan is for. The shorter the loan, the better off you'll be. All those three things are important. It's not just the monthly payment. And that will determine whether or not you really got a good deal or not. I hope this video was helpful. If you like this video, please like and or subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.